Hi, everyone. I'm Lloyd Gong. I'm the Global Director of Marketing with the ZAPI Group. Welcome to the third Future of Electrification virtual event. We're thrilled to have you join us. Just a few housekeeping points. Please remember that this keynote session is being recorded and will be available to watch on demand following this session. If you have any questions during this session, please add them to the Q&A. You can find that tab to the right of your screen. Note that your questions will be sent privately and not visible to others. With that, I'd like to introduce our speaker. Stefan Hyttfors is an acclaimed futurist and global speaker who focuses on disruptive technologies, behavioral change, and next generation leadership. All topics that are germane to realizing the dream of an all-electric future. Stefan is here with us live, but interestingly, he's traveling in Sweden, deep in the woods, as I understand it, doing military service. And due to some last minute concerns about reliability and bandwidth of his connection, due to his remote location, we pre-recorded this presentation for us to deliver first, and then he'll be available for live questions at the end. Welcome, Stefan.
Thank you so much, Lloyd, and hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to be with you, and I'm happy to be able to be with you since I'm in this remote location. So it's a pleasure to be here.
Well, we certainly appreciate it. Okay, let's begin.
First of all, a disclaimer, I'm not an expert in any field related to electrification. I'm a futurist. Unfortunately, it doesn't mean that I know what the future will be like. It means that I study trends and scenarios. I'll come back to this in just a bit. In this session, I will talk about the future in general, about sustainability in a broader perspective, about technology as a driver of change, and about leadership. It's the key to who will win and who will lose. So the future, as I said, I don't know what it holds. No one does, of course.
Meanwhile, economist Harry Dent is making a dire prediction about the market next year. He says 2024 is going to bring, and I'm quoting him now, the biggest crash of our lifetime. Economist John Wadsky is here. What do you think of Dent's prediction?
But it's important to remind ourselves of we have a really lousy track record. Human beings are not very good at predicting the future. And to me, this is even more important to think about in times of big changes. You see, when we worry about disruption, we tend to give more of our time and attention to experts. Listen to economists to tell us about what will happen in the financial market, or politicians to tell us what will happen in conflicts, or technology experts to tell us what will happen as a result of innovation, and so on. And the thing is, they don't know either. You can think of experts like market-leading corporations looking at their track record. They are obviously the best in their field. But that track is behind us. And what if the road up ahead is something completely different? You know the stories of the Kodaks and Nokia and Blockbuster Video. They were all experts. I often hear people tell these stories of failure to ridicule them. But I believe that's missing the point. Kodak didn't go bankrupt because their leaders were stupid, or because they didn't invest in innovation and R&D. They were more innovative than any other company of the 60s and 70s and 80s. They were the Google of the time. Their brand was everywhere. They were on the moon. Kodak died because they were the best in the world, doing something no one needs. So in times of great change, experience, and a great track record of success, expertise can become a problem. There are currently more than 1,200 unicorn companies. That's privately held startups already valued at $1 billion or more. And then there are the Soonicorns, $100 million valuation, and the Minicorns, thousands of billions of dollars, doing everything they can every day to disrupt the old markets and beat the biggest and most well-known company, to prove the experts are wrong. The past 3 years of the pandemic, inflation, wars, should be an important reminder of how unpredictable the future is. And more importantly, it should make us more humble about the fact that we don't know. The reason we tend to listen so much to experts is because it feels good. It gives us this illusion of control. Don't hear me wrong now. I'm not saying we shouldn't listen to experts at all. Expertise, of course, is needed. I'm just arguing that we should be careful with predictions. Predictions, they are like sausage. Everyone wants them until they know what they're made of. So you should see predictions for what they are. Most of the time, it's nothing more than just extrapolation of the past. Now, to help us navigate the future, we should, instead of listening to predictions, we should study trend lines. What is growing and what is shrinking. And when you do that, you should be aware of two hurdles. The first one is your own bias. Do you like this trend? Do you like something like electric cars? Do you like electric cars or not? What do you think of social media, TikTok, and Snapchat? What's your opinion on artificial intelligence? I guess you have heard about S-curves, the S-shaped curve of new technology. It shows how slow it starts. In the beginning, it's not working properly. It's very inefficient, expensive. Then, if it's not just a fad, you can see how this new technology takes off and enters the exponential growth phase here. All the early adopters acquire capital and interest, and then it takes off and it skyrockets to finally fade out. The adoption curve also, of course, follows this path. Early adopters in the start of the S and laggards in the upper corner. And you are free to have your own opinion regarding any current trend or technology. But again, it's a hurdle. Watch out for your own feelings. Your opinion will not tell you anything important about the future, except if you're early or late in the adoption curve. The second hurdle to watch out for is size. We are obsessed with size. How big is a trend? How big is the market share? What's the sales figure? How many subscribers or viewers or likes? To understand the future, you should focus on speed rather than size. How fast is it? If you do this, if you pinpoint a trend that's relevant to you, and you manage to leave your own feelings, your own opinions aside, and you study speed, then you can start to create scenarios. What if this speed continues for a year or 3 years or 5 years? If it's going exponential, it means it's doubling. So from 4, we will go to 8, to 16, to 34, to 64. We will pass 100% in just 5 steps. And then you can cluster these scenarios as wild card, possible, and probable. And then, of course, depending on how important this is to your life or to your business, you can start to allocate time, money, resources accordingly. To do this is to be a leader. A leader will understand that big changes needs time. A leader trusts in everyday micro ambitions rather than overnight success. A leader knows the importance of being proactive. The burning platform is this well-known metaphor, not just for change, but for bad leadership. You don't need to end up in a burning platform. A great leader will never face a burning platform. Before I dive into today's topic, I also have to tell you about a false narrative. And this is important to keep in mind when we look ahead. I've been traveling all over the world to meet with people from all different industries at more than 1,000 business conferences and events. And there is one thing we have been talking about no matter what business you're in, what country, what culture you're in, and that is change. You have to be adaptable, agile, innovative, think outside the box. I guess it sounds familiar. And the thing is, it wasn't true. Looking back, we can realize that we had 4 decades of cheap energy, and that's the foundation for all of our well-being, all of our progress, and all of our growth. 4 decades of cheap energy, ever since the oil crisis of the 70s, up until last winter of 22. For 3 decades, we didn't have to consider geopolitics and security, things like conflicts. With the collapse of the Soviet Union, we moved from a Cold War to the unipolar world. And to everybody, at least the ones who were friends with the sole superpower, the US, it's been 3 decades of globalization and free trade agreements. We had 20 years of cheap labor. China joined the World Trade Organization in 2001, and for 2 decades, our economies were transformed from production to consumption. And I mean, boy, did we consume. Ever since the financial crisis in 08, 09, we have enjoyed 0% interest rates. And because of that, the last decade, we had more than 10 years of the longest bull market in history on the stock market. You can check any ticker for this period, the NASDAQ, Dow Jones, the Stockholm index, whatever. It's going to be up 350-ish percent. So looking back, we can just conclude it's been good. It's been perfectly fine, even to the ones who weren't that great at adapting to change. 40 years of tailwind. But looking at today's trend curves, there are good reasons, I would say, and we will come to this, to believe that the tailwind is gone. I'm not a doom and gloom person. I don't think of the future as good or bad per definition. We know it will be both. But I do think we will see a growing gap. A gap between the ones who will miss this tailwind, and on the other side, the ones who are really good at navigating and working to keep speed in this new era. So let's talk about it. What trends will define the new era? And how do we know electrification is a catalyst? The first trend, and one of the most obvious ones, is climate change. I know we have been talking about it now for decades, but the way we talk about it has changed. In just 10 years, climate change morphed from a future problem to a current opportunity. 10 years ago, the message was stop. You have to just stop whatever you're doing. You remember Earth Hour, lights out. Well, we stopped for 1 hour a year. Back then, that was it. The message was not very inspiring. Whatever you are doing, you need to stop doing that. And I guess if we just think of emissions, it is true. Because we're all in some way in the same business. We wake up in the morning and we go to work to move coal atoms from the ground to the atmosphere. And we need to stop doing that. I mean, when you think about it, the reason we are a successful species is because this planet has an average temperature of 15 degrees Celsius, 59 Fahrenheit, something like that. And this is because of a perfect distance from the sun and because of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. Without this cozy blanket surrounding us, this blanket of carbon, the average temperature on planet Earth would fall 33 degrees to minus 18 Celsius. So that means all water would be frozen solid. In that environment, I guess human beings would probably not be a successful species. On the other hand, by burning fossil fuels, by moving coal from the ground to the atmosphere, this blanket, this greenhouse gas is getting thicker. And that, of course, means that temperature is rising. Climate change isn't something new. The climate was always changing. And extreme weather, heat waves, floodings, droughts, wildfires are nothing new either. But the speed is. And remember, I told you to focus on the speed. One way to measure this is to just look at the costs of weather-related disasters. Like here, the Maui wildfire last summer in Hawaii. 100 people dead and an estimated $5 billion in damage. The insurance industry, they refer to events like this as billion-dollar disasters. And as you can hear, that means the insurance companies now have billions of reasons to pay attention to this trend. And again, wildfires and floodings and droughts are nothing new. But if you adjust for inflation, and if you go back to the 1980s, there was an average of 75 days between every billion-dollar disaster in the US. And today that span is down to 18 days. This is according to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA. Insurance is a product you buy to protect against the unexpected. But now, when we fully expect it, we won't be able to buy insurance, of course. So that's just one example. But to stop isn't helpful advice. We can't just turn the lights off more than maybe that 1 hour per year. Go back to live like 200 years ago. The transition away from fossil fuels into cleaner, renewable forms of energy will not happen because we stop, but rather because we start. Sources like the wind and the sun are free. And we know two things about technology. It will be more efficient and less expensive with time. That is not true of commodities like coal and oil or natural gas. Extraction will always cost money. So the reason we will start a new era of renewable energy technologies is not because of new ideals or environmentalism. It's because of money.
China's appetite for energy is enormous. The country consumes about a quarter of the world's energy supply, 35% more than the US annually. Its energy needs have more than tripled since the year 2000. China's investments in renewables help drive astonishing price drops across the industry, leading to record levels of new wind and solar installations all over the world in recent years. Last year, wind and solar generated more than 10% of the world's electricity.
I hear this all the time from my clients. 10 years ago, leaders briefed me before any conference. They said, you have to talk about sustainability because it's a serious problem and a big cost. But we are investing heavily to compensate for emissions. And today, they don't talk about that. They don't say like that anymore. Now they say, we want you to come and talk about sustainability because that's where we will find new growth and profits. The future problem is now a current opportunity. And it's not a small opportunity. Planet Earth will be 2 to 4 degrees warmer by the year 2100. And of course, it doesn't sound like much, but that means a majority of days every year could become dangerously hot in many parts of the world. And billions of people will have to adapt to temperatures above 50. That's 125 Fahrenheit as a normal part of life. Heat like that will kill people. It does already today when we have heat waves like that. And just like with the billion-dollar disasters for the insurance industry, we will face this much more often as temperatures are rising. That's one of the consequences. And of course, when the heat rises, a growing number of people will wake up and realize that this is the greatest threat facing us. And with that, we will stop burning fossil fuels. Because at the same time, looking at the speed of technological evolution, we are transforming society. And this will happen now in the coming 25 years. That's one generation. So everything our forefathers did took them about 7 generations to build up civilization as we think of it today. We will rebuild in one. So we will rebuild everything they did for 7 generations in just 1 generation. If you don't think that sounds like the greatest business opportunity of a lifetime, you probably shouldn't be in business. And no matter what you hear in the news, it's happening. Doesn't matter what politicians are talking about to, get their votes. Or 2022 was the first year ever where solar and wind passed coal and gas as energy source in the European Union. And of course, this was not just due to technological advances. This green line, as you see here, is of course the result of action due to Putin's war. But the same thing is going on in the United States too. It's already cheaper in many states to build and operate an entirely new solar or wind plant than to continue operating an existing coal-fired plant. So just like the green graph from Europe, electricity from wind and sun will pass coal sometime this year. And the best way, I think, to illustrate how much of this is driven by money rather than politics is to note that the US state producing the most clean energy is Texas, home of oil. So again, don't pay too much attention to opinions. Study the trend. Of course, there are problems and challenges like how to store energy, how to have power when there is no sun or wind. There are consequences from mining. There are problems with worker rights when you're doing business with authoritarian countries. But these are problems where also opportunities lie. Tomorrow's most successful companies will be successful because they are solving these problems. Today's true problem. The shift from brown to green is not a question of if, but when. And it won't be primarily because of politics, even though legislation, of course, can save us time. It's happening because of money. The race towards zero has started. Well-known example is Tesla.
This week we're gonna take a Model Y through Norway and see how it performs on just a customer level, customer expectation.
Testing is important because we can predict what the customer will experience when they are actually driving here.
Today, we often hear about Tesla when it's not necessarily about the company or any of their products, their cars. Tesla has become like an analogy for the race towards zero. So when you hear about a startup and the headline tells you their ambition is to become the Tesla of and then their industry, you immediately understand that means they will go for zero emission. That's their business idea. And as I said, the reason they will do that is not just to please environmentalists. It's because of money. If you compare the costs and the risk of future costs of emissions, if you compare that to the potential upside, if you manage to eliminate that risk, to take emissions down to zero, that business case is obvious. So think of it like this. Remember 20 years ago, something like that, when we said everything that can be digital will be digital. Same thing this time. Everything that can go to zero will go to zero. The next question then is how? And this is where technology and especially artificial intelligence comes in. 30 years ago, Jim Barksdale, the CEO of Netscape, said something like this: if we have data, let's look at it. But if all we have are opinions, then let's go with mine. And I guess, that's fair. If you are the leader and if you don't have data, eventually you will have to take responsibility. And if all decisions are based on gut feelings, in the end, the CEO will have the last call. But now, 30 years later, the point is we have data. 90% of all the data in the world was produced in the last 2 years. So right now, we have so much data at a faster growing speed. So let's look back again to try to understand the path we are on. First, there was computers. Computers were big machines, good at calculating. But this was not so much of a revolution to society, since most people didn't have access. If you look at this computer here, it's easy to realize that back in the 60s and 70s, not many people had access to a computer. But of course, that changed as a result of exponential growth in processing power and Moore's law and all that, you know. So we went from the mainframes to desktop. And with desktop, as you can hear, access grew exponentially. So we had computers on pretty much any worker's desktop. And then with the internet and the World Wide Web, we also could connect those computers. So we went from big computers to smaller computers to connected computers, and then eventually to even smaller computers. I mean, now with the smartphone, everyone have access to a computer. And today it's easy to see how the world of computers have changed society. When we look at when Steve Jobs introduced the first iPhone, this is now 15 years ago. Back then, of course, we didn't fully understand what was coming. I mean, to be honest, I don't think he did either, because it took him more than a year to introduce the App Store. But the App Store is when the true revolution started. Mobile phones, you remember that before the App Store, that was a hardware industry. But when anyone can develop the software, when just an idea of innovation and access is enough, the number of apps just exploded. And today we all have the same hardware, more or less. It doesn't matter if you have an Apple or a Samsung or a 13 or a 14, or we all have a piece of glass. But if you look at my phone, the functions, the apps I'm running is going to be very different from yours. And next up is wearables. So we are wearing computers on our bodies. Like I have a watch here, and this watch is more powerful than that old mainframe computer. And this means we will get information not just from the outside, but from the inside as well. How was my sleep last night? How many steps have I taken so far today? What's my pulse right now? And so on. How am I? And more importantly, why? What did I do different today compared to yesterday or last week? And with all the data we are sharing, eventually technology will understand me better than I understand myself. If you have employees, some of them will show up on a Monday morning to quit their jobs because the watch tells them it's time. Look here, I mean, if I don't quit this job, I will lose 6 years of my life. So from computers to connected computers to small computers, and now finally AI to help us make sense of all the data. We can't do it. I mean, we have a hard time to remember a phone number or a new PIN code. So we go to doctors with our problems, even though these doctors never have the capacity to accumulate all the necessary data from all the patients in the world and from all new science and from all the small changes going on in my body. But AI will. Isaac Newton once said like this, and to me this is a very inspiring way to think about AI. AI will help us to find so many new drops in this ocean of questions. And many of these drops will be about electrification. How to ramp up production and storage, how to increase efficiency in distributions, networks, electric grids, how to optimize consumption. In just a few years' time, when you wake up in the morning, just like today, most of you will start by interacting with a device. Let's call it a phone, because that's what it is today, to just understand what I'm talking about. So we start the day with the phone. But instead of today's habit, today we check the usuals. You check your email, news, weather, Instagram, same pictures, same friends, like this endless scrolling thing going on. Instead of that, in just a few years, the phone will guide you. Your AI assistant will tell you everything you need to know. Updates on relationships, dating prospects, suggestions for new jobs to apply for, jobs that are a perfect match for you, vacation plans, and of course all the completed tasks like, okay, here is a summary. I have closed the deal with a new utility company for electricity. Yearly savings will be more than $1,000 from that deal. I have applied for the new job you asked me about last week, and they decided to include you in the final round for in-person interviews. I can brief you on that case today. But after the gym, when your brain, all the feel-good neurotransmitters and endorphins are at a high level, and of course, I paid all your bills and scheduled today's work sessions for best performance, etc., etc. Coffee is ready downstairs. Good morning to you. How about that start instead of the scrolling for whatever kind of content you're scrolling for? In this world, efficiency will be something completely new. I guess you've seen examples of how efficient we are today compared to back in history. Like there is this human progress project comparing how we, back in the prehistoric era, how much time a person would have to work, to gather and chop and burn wood to produce light. So for 10 hours a day, for 6 days straight, you could produce the equivalent light of a modern light bulb shining for about an hour. But then, of course, with innovation and technology, new technology, came oil-burning lanterns, and then candles, and then around the 1880s, Thomas Edison's electric bulb meant that we could cut that down to 60 hours of work to get 72 hours of lighting. And by the 1950s, those same 60 hours of labor would light a bulb for nearly 1,200 days. Today, however, light is something you and I take for granted. We don't work for light. We just flip the switch. The future of AI means the same thing for knowledge. 20 years ago, we had to go to a travel agency to get knowledge, to get information about when a train or a flight is leaving. Today, of course, we can solve that in an app. But we still have to go to the app. We have to go there to do it ourselves. Go to the app to look for it and compare prices and timetables and offers. When AI does all the searching, all the comparing, all the negotiating, all the booking and financing and paying, we will think of the search engine and the app as really slow, and of course thereby also expensive, just like we think of oil burning lanterns today. In this world, efficiency will be something completely new. So just like no one will burn oil for light, pretty much no one will spend time in looking for answers when technology will just give them to us on an individual level. Artificial intelligence and electrification are not just tools for combating climate change. Just like with any new technology, there are gateways to a new era of economic growth and opportunity. And again, remember, I told you we need to rebuild everything in just one generation. So it is well needed. And this is the how. Electrification will be one of the keys. It will be the catalyst for this new era. And of course, in such a new era, there are many new winners as a result of it. That's what a new era means. And with new winners, there will also be new losers. So much of the future will be about a growing divide, a gap between the proactive ones who focus on progress and sustainable growth, and the reactive ones who fight hard to protect their old possessions and systems and models. So to conclude here, let me shift to leadership. There is so much talk about remote work. I believe that's not the right way to think of it. The important question to ask is not where you work, but rather what is work? I mean, the question is only relevant if work, when I ask you about what is work, if work is a place with tasks. But if when I ask this question, if work to you is more like a culture with a mission, the question of where is irrelevant. So what will define a culture with a mission? As you know, they need to share a common sense of why. Why are we working? What's the purpose of this thing we're doing? I guess you heard and read all about this in different kind of management books. The way I think of it is like this, to answer the why. We used to work for more when we needed more, when we needed to work for 10 days to have some wood to burn for some light, or when we needed to work for 60 hours for just some oil to our lantern. We used to work for more. But increasingly in the future, we will work for security. So instead of more, we want something safer. I think this is the inevitable outcome of today's era of the so-called polycrisis environment. We have environmental challenges, conflicts, geopolitics in this new multipolar world. We have financial insecurity with inflation and debt and all that. We have experience from a pandemic, maybe more to come, etc., etc. So instead of working for more, people will be attracted to work for safer. And this takes us to another interesting divide. When we look at the people under 30 of age, so the ones we refer to as Generation Z, it turns out Generation Z is two generations actually, not one. And this is true no matter where you study this trend in every continent. So these two generations are separated not by age. They are below 30, but they are separated because of opinions. They have different opinions of what they want to be safe from. What are their worries? It turns out that young women increasingly vote left because they worry about the environment. And young men increasingly vote right because they worry about violence. And this is, I mean, after decades where the sexes were each spread roughly equally across liberal and conservative, women aged 18 to 30 are now progressive and men are conservative. If we check a recent Gallup here, this is true. In the US and Germany, young women are 30 percentage points more liberal than young men. In the United Kingdom, 25%. Last year's election in Poland, almost half of the young men backed the hard right party, compared to 16% of women the same age. Asia, I mean, if you think of South Korea, they have the biggest divide here. That might give a hint of the future, what this leads to, because now we can see that as an effect of this divide between young men and women, marriage rates have plummeted and birth rates have fallen. So reproduction is fallen. Right now, South Korea currently stand at 0.78 births per woman in 2022. That's the lowest of any country in the world. So to tie it all together, AI will provide answers. And one of these answers will be electrification. The question of why you work will be answered not so much about financial results and money, but rather we work to make life safer, my life safer. And then again, the question is, what do you worry about? What do you want to be safe from? And on the question of what is work, is it a culture with a mission or is it just a place with a task? That's going to be a big divider. And that takes it all down to the how. How of leaders, how do you do it? Do you want answers? Or do you have a sincere interest in finding the most relevant questions? Remember what the American poet Maya Angelou once said. No one will ever remember what you did, what you said. Everyone will always remember how you made them feel. I think when everyone have access to advanced technologies, not just computers or connected devices or wearable devices, but also with AI. With AI, everybody will have access to knowledge, to these new drops in the ocean that until now wasn't available to anyone. So when everyone have access to that, you can't compete with technology, with data, with AI. The only way to compete is to have a different question, a different prompt, to work with what we refer to as pure human emotions. The revolution of electrification and AI is rational, but the future of work, and thereby the focus for leaders, is emotional. So I hope that gave you some new thoughts, hopefully some inspiration. And I wish you a lovely continuation of this day and the best of luck. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stefan. You certainly make a compelling case for the certainty of getting to zero. Thank you. Just to kick things off with a question, this is from me. What would you say for people in the electrification industry, which is primarily our audience, what would you say is the biggest takeaway for the business of electrification? How do you think it'll change over the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, again, since I'm not the expert, I was trying to set the scene and talk about the way I think of the current trends that are, in my world, pretty obvious, pointing this direction. I think my takeaway is, I mean, there are three reasons actually for why this will happen. The first one is, of course, like I talked about, the pure and simple reason that we must. It will be increasingly so hard to adapt to life on Earth. So sooner or later, we will sort of see this as the biggest problem of them all from a security, from a safety perspective. And this is not just from, being safe from heat. This is also to protect your business, to protect your investments. Today, I realize that a lot of the people listening are probably in some kind of innovation or startup phase. That means that you have to take on risk. very soon this will pivot, and you will see that it's a risk-off perspective. You will actually want to get rid of risk. So on Wall Street, we can already see that the shift from brown to green is because climate risk is investment risk. So that's the first reason that we will do this, because we have to do this because of nature. Again, it's not about saving the planet. That's a misconception. The planet will be fine. This is about us. For how long are we going to be able to be on this planet? So that's the first one. The second one then is how, and the takeaway is we can. So it will happen because we can, and that's because of technology. So electrification is a very good example of how we can actually drive everything that's going on in society without necessarily emitting carbon. Right now, up until now, at least, as I said, pretty much everyone, no matter what industry you're in, are still in the business of moving coal from the earth to the atmosphere. And since that is one of the biggest problems, electrification and different kind of techniques and technologies for how to create and consume energy without emissions is going to be one of the top priorities for every industry, since the race to zero is on. And that means, like I said, just like we wanted to go for the digital transformation, we will go for the race to zero, not so much anymore because we have to compensate our lousy business model, but rather because this is where we see new opportunities for growth. So a lot of tomorrow's unicorn companies will be the ones who solve today's problems in how to propel business in a zero emission world. And the third reason, I mean, if we must and we can, the incentive here and why this will happen sooner than we think is because we win. So you will win and your business will win. And we already see that. And I mentioned the obvious example of Tesla as a winner in the stock market or in the financial market, any kind of perspective in the brand value market. It's going to be about money. And to be slow and dirty is quite frankly, it's obviously more expensive than to be fast and clean. So when I think of the digital transformation, again, the reason we are doing so much today in the digital world is because it's superior. So when you think about the digital transformation, one way to think about it is that with digitalization, we can ship information instead of shipping stuff. And that's how we solve our problems. That's how we create value, by shipping information. And this is the same thing now. Now in this world here, we can soon realize that by going electric, I will be able to be not just cleaner and safer, but also cheaper, more efficient. The reason people will shift to products like electric cars is not necessarily because people love the idea of going electric. It's eventually because of efficiency. It's so much more efficient and therefore superior to the old technology. Like I said, technology is like a natural force. It will be cheaper and more efficient with time. So those are the three takeaways. We must, we can, and we win.
Excellent. I do have a few questions from the audience. Here's one. What is the biggest uncertainty that could delay the trend towards electrification? So for our industry, is there, and I've got a number of questions like this.
Yeah, I think there are many. Like I mentioned, the future is very uncertain. And of course, we have a trend that is quite hard to look at, and that's the polarization in the world and how the world is drifting afar. And I mean, just look at something like democracy index. We can see, for example, that for the last 16 years, democracy is a negative trend. It's in a decline. So people who have freedom actually vote to have less freedom. And of course, that might be one of the examples of very unpredictable trends that could create hurdles and problems.
Yeah, makes sense. Just a last question. I know you have to get on with your military service. So wish you well with that. This question is germane to our business and around batteries. So this is discussed a lot. The concern about environmental contamination from the materials we put in batteries. There's extra costs inherent in battery manufacturing that the industry is seeing. Those kind of trends. What do you think is going to happen in terms of technology advances to address this?
Well, I think that's a great example of one industry where innovation and new ideas will create so much change so that we could probably not even fantasize about what will happen. And therefore the analogy with the big computers going from big mainframes down to desktops to laptops to mobile and eventually wearables, and now technology is more or less invincible. So today when we think about battery production, we have a problem with natural resources and worker rights and all these environment. Eventually maybe one of the solutions is to be so much more better and more efficient in recycling. One of the solutions might be in hydrogen technologies, so that we can store energy, not just in lithium or those technologies. There might be, we have projects going on where I am right now, where we actually use dams to act like batteries. So when you have the sun or the wind, you can just fill the dam with water, and then when the wind and the sun goes away, you can use that water power to. So there are many new innovative examples, I think, of how we will actually think of how to store energy in a so much more efficient way than we are able to do today. So we would probably not even believe in those solutions 10 years ahead if we could, see them presented today. Just like people with a computer big like a room could not have believed in a smartwatch.
Excellent, thank you. Last quick question, also from the audience. How can we encourage, you talked a bit about Gen Z, new entrants into the workforce, for our businesses to expand, we need to hire. What do you think is the biggest takeaway for attracting new employees from this generation?
Two things. I think, first of all, to take a stand, to be aware of the fact that in this world you could probably not please everybody. So you have to make sure that you are willing to take a risk by taking a stand, choosing a side, telling them this is why we want to do this. And the second one, I think, is to be focused on innovation in a true and curious perspective, and not just talk about innovation, but everybody actually knows that it's going to be about profits in the end anyway. So I think you can attract a lot of young people by just giving them the opportunities to create what they think is important.
That's great. Well, thank you so much, Stefan. We'll let you get back to your service. Really appreciate the keynote. Thanks for attending. And for the
Pleasure.
Yes, thank you. And I understand we can reach out to you on LinkedIn if people want to connect with you.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. If anybody have any questions popping up or want to reach out or connect, you can find me, well, any channel you prefer. I'm pretty much anywhere if you can Google my name, but LinkedIn is a good one. So that's fine. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you very much again. And
thank you. Good luck.
Yeah, thank you. And for all attending, thank you for joining us for this keynote. Just please, from the lobby, join your next sessions. The full agenda is there. Thank you.